John Everett looked out the window of Earth's best spaceship as it flew toward the giant ring where the Galactic Council met. After hundreds of years alone in space, humans finally got a chance to talk with the Council, a group of the 27 most powerful alien civilizations in the galaxy. "We're almost at Docking Bay 17, Ambassador," said Captain Lisa Morrison from her pilot chair. She tried to sound calm, but John heard worry in her voice. They carried all of Earth's hopes with them. "Thanks, Captain. I hope they're friendly," John said, fixing his fancy uniform. The ship slid into a huge docking area filled with strange vessels. Some looked like they were made of crystal. Others seemed alive, made of flesh and bone. Earth's ship, though impressive back home, looked like a toy compared to the others. When the Earth team stepped out, John, his helper Samuel Brooks, and alien expert Dr. Eleanor Wright, they met a group of Council aliens. Their leader was tall and thin with skin that changed colors like an ocean sunset. "Ambassador Everett, I am Coordinator Zal3. We will take you to the Council room," the alien said through a translator that turned musical sounds into English. "The Council is eager to meet humans." Something in how Zal3 said eager made John worried. After 20 years as a diplomat, he had learned to spot hidden meanings in conversations. This didn't feel like a friendly welcome. The Earth team followed their guides through huge hallways filled with aliens from hundreds of worlds. Some aliens stared at the humans like zoo animals. Others turned away as if disgusted. The welcome was clearly mixed. "I don't like this," Samuel whispered as they walked. "Have you seen how they're looking at us?" "Like we're either strange animals or a disease," Eleanor said quietly. "Is this normal fear of new aliens or something worse?" John kept his face calm. "Let's wait and see what the Council says before we worry." They reached massive doors that glowed with their own light. As the doors opened, John took a deep breath. This meeting would decide humanity's future among the stars. The Council room was a giant circle with 27 raised platforms. On each platform sat leaders of the ruling species. The humans were led to a small platform in the middle, where everyone could stare down at them. "The Council welcomes the people from the planet Sol 3, also called Earth," boomed a voice from everywhere. At once. "You may introduce yourselves." John stepped forward. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, I am Ambassador John Everett from Earth. On behalf of all humans, I thank you for this historic chance to—" "We know how greetings work," interrupted a lizard-like alien with colorful head fans. "We didn't meet to exchange nice words, but to deal with the human problem." John stopped, surprised. "The human problem?" "Yes," said another counselor who looked like a cloud of gas. "Your species invented faster-than-light travel hundreds of years before our prediction said you could. This strange development needs explaining." Whispers filled the room. John noticed how the word strange was spoken, with suspicion and dislike. "Also," added a crystal-like being with a bell-like voice, "humans have spread to 7 star systems in just 40 years, building colonies and mining operations too quickly. This aggressive expansion must stop." John felt his diplomatic smile fading. "With respect, counselors, humans advanced through our own science and hard work. We want peaceful trade and friendship with—" "Your species had its last world war only 100 years ago," said the lizard counselor. "Your history, which we have studied, shows violence, greed, and self-destruction that makes humans especially dangerous among space-traveling species." The room grew quiet as a tall, graceful alien with 4 arms stood up from the main platform. John recognized this species from his briefings. This was a Vexlor, one of the Council's founding members. "Ambassador Everett," the Vexler spoke with a surprisingly gentle voice, "you must understand our worry. The Council exists to keep peace and prevent dangerous powers from rising. Humans' quick advancement, combined with your history of fighting, looks like a threat to galactic peace." John felt Eleanor and Samuel tense beside him. This wasn't a diplomatic meeting. It was a trial. "Therefore," the Vexler continued, "the Council wants these limits on human expansion. No new colonies beyond your current 7 systems, Council supervision of all human technology research, and watching stations at key points in human space. The silence that followed felt heavy. John could hardly believe what he was hearing. They weren't being welcomed. They were being caged. Samuel leaned close. "Ambassador, they're treating us like a protected species. Or prisoners." "They're scared of us," Eleanor whispered. "This isn't about peace. It's about control." John nodded, slightly, his mind racing through possible responses. But before he could form a careful answer, the lizard counselor spoke again. "Let me be clear for our primitive guests," it said, with mouthparts clicking in what John knew was a sign of disrespect. "Your species is too violent, too unpredictable, and too ambitious to be trusted with free access to the galaxy. You are like children playing with dangerous fire. The Council has decided to supervise your development before you hurt yourselves or others." In that moment, John Everett, who had spent 20 years in Earth's diplomatic corps, felt something change inside him. This wasn't diplomacy. This was an insult to every human who had worked, sacrificed, and dreamed of traveling among the stars. He stepped forward, ready to give humanity's answer. The council room buzzed with tension as John Everett took a careful step forward. The way the lizard counselor had spoken about humans with such disrespect demanded an answer. John knew that what he said next would be remembered in human history, forever. "Respected counselors," he began, his voice strong and clear, "I have listened carefully to your concerns and your opinion of my species." The room stayed quiet. The alien representatives watched with looks ranging from open dislike to cold curiosity. John couldn't help but notice how they all looked down at the human team from their high platforms, a physical sign of their feeling of being better than humans. "Before I answer your proposed limits, I'd like to ask one question," John continued. "You've studied our history, but I'm curious which parts of human history made you decide we are especially dangerous?" The gas-like counselor's form rippled in what might have been annoyance. "Ambassador, the evidence is everywhere. Your world wars, your nuclear weapons, your damage to your environment, your social conflicts, even your entertainment shows violence and conquest." Another counselor, a being with many-sided eyes and a hard-shell body, added, "Our study shows that humans are the only known species to make weapons that could destroy their whole world before achieving unity on their home planet. This pattern suggests you are naturally aggressive in a way that makes your species a problem." John nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And have you also studied our art, our music, our literature, our advances in medicine and efforts to save endangered animals, the international teamwork that finally led to our world government?" "These are small points against a larger pattern," dismissed the lizard counselor. "The fact remains that humans went from simple technology to faster-than-light travel in less than 3,000 years, a speed never seen before that suggests outside help or dangerous shortcuts in your development." A new voice joined the talk, a counselor who looked like a mass of twisting vines with flowers. "Let's be direct. The Council has run simulations of unrestricted human expansion. Within 500 years, your colonies would number in the hundreds, your resource use would destabilize entire sectors, and your military power would match the founding members of this council. We cannot allow this." John felt Eleanor shift beside him, clearly upset by these claims. Samuel quietly passed him a data pad with notes, but John set it aside. What needed to be said now would come from his heart, not from prepared speeches. "Counselors," John said, his voice taking on a new tone that filled the room, "I've listened to your view of humanity, and I find it lacks context and depth. Yes, our history has violence and mistakes. We admit this openly. But to define us only by our conflicts, rather than our growth from them, shows a deep misunderstanding of humanity." Whispers spread through the room at his directness. The Vexler counselor raised a hand for quiet. "Ambassador Everett, you stand before the combined wisdom of civilizations thousands of years more advanced than your own. The Council's judgment is based on objective analysis of predictive models refined over thousands of years. Your emotional defense of your species is understandable but not relevant to these proceedings." And there it was, the real insult beneath the polite words. Not just what they thought about humans, but their absolute certainty that their view was the only one that mattered. That humans could be fully known and dismissed based on data points and computer models. John felt both anger and clarity. He glanced at Eleanor and Samuel, saw in their eyes the same feelings, but also trust in him to speak for Earth. He squared his shoulders and stepped even closer to the edge of their small platform. With all due respect, honored counselors, John said, each word measured and clear, your objective analysis has led you to a deeply wrong conclusion. You've mistaken our capacity for conflict as our defining feature, when in fact it is our capacity for growth that truly makes humanity special. The lizard counselor's head fans flared in what John recognized as irritation. You dare question the council's judgment? This only confirms our assessment of human arrogance. Not arrogance, counselor. Perspective, John replied. You see, the very traits you find most concerning, our rapid advancement, our expansion, our ambition, these come from qualities you've failed to include in your models. The gas counselor swirled in agitation. And what qualities might those be, Ambassador? John looked around the room, making eye contact with as many counselors as possible. Our resilience, our creativity, our diversity of thought, and most importantly, our ability to learn from our mistakes and become better than we were. A heavy silence fell over the room. John could see his words had at least captured their attention, even if doubt remained clear in their postures and expressions. You judge us for developing nuclear weapons, but fail to note that we have not used them in war for over a century. You point to our environmental damage without recognizing the planetary healing projects that followed. You cite our conflicts without noting that each has led to stronger international laws and cooperation. The Crystal Counselor chimed in. These are mere fixes to your own mistakes, not achievements to be celebrated. On the contrary, John replied, true wisdom comes not from avoiding all errors, but from learning and growing from them. A concept that, forgive me, seems missing from this council's thinking. Angry murmurs spread through the room. The Vexler counselor stood to full height, towering even from a distance. You have been granted an audience with the Galactic Council, not a platform for insulting its wisdom. The restrictions proposed are generous given the potential threat humanity represents. Your reaction only confirms our concerns about human temperament. John felt a moment of doubt. Was he going too far? Endangering the very diplomatic relationship he was meant to build? But looking at the clear condescension in every aspect of this audience, he knew that true diplomacy required honesty, not submission. Counselors, let me be clear, John said, his voice ringing with quiet conviction. Humanity does not seek the Council's approval or permission to exist in this galaxy. We come offering friendship and cooperation as equals, not as beggars. If that basic principle is unacceptable to this body, then perhaps we have nothing more to discuss. The room erupted in outrage. Multiple counselors rose from their seats, speaking over one another in various languages that the translation systems struggled to keep up with. The lizard counselor's voice cut through the chaos. This is unheard of. No species has ever rejected the Council's guidance so openly. This human speaks of equality when their civilization is barely a footnote in galactic history. The insult hung in the air, raw and undisguised. John knew that whatever he said next would define humanity's relationship with the galactic community for generations to come. He glanced at Eleanor and Samuel, who both gave him subtle nods of support. Then he faced the Council once more, ready to deliver humanity's true response to their condescension. Ambassador John Everett stood calmly in the middle of the storm he had created. The council room was in chaos. Some counselors waved their limbs angrily, others whispered urgently to their helpers, and a few just watched with new interest. John had studied diplomatic rules for months, but there were no rules for this situation, because no species had ever challenged the council's authority so directly. The Vexler counselor finally restored order with a musical sound that quieted the room. With all four arms raised in a commanding gesture, the being addressed John directly. Ambassador Everett, perhaps you don't understand the nature of this meeting. The Council is not offering terms for negotiation. We are telling you the reality of your species' position in the galactic community. John nodded respectfully. I understand perfectly, Counselor. And now I'm telling you humanity's position. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. He knew Earth's relationship with hundreds of advanced civilizations depended on his next words. The easy path would be to give in, to accept the Council's terms and hope for better treatment later. But John knew that path would set a pattern that might take hundreds of years to change. Honored counselors, he began, his voice level but reaching every corner of the vast room. Humanity has spent its history overcoming limits. Limits of our planet, our bodies, our understanding, and our conflicts with each other. Each challenge has made us stronger, taught us, and ultimately improved us. He gestured to the grand room around them. You have built something amazing here. A group of different species working toward common goals. This achievement deserves respect, and humanity truly wants to learn from your combined wisdom. The lizard counselor made a dismissive gesture. Pretty words to hide your rejection of our authority. Not a rejection, counselor, John corrected. A clarification. Humanity seeks to join this community as contributors, not as subjects. The DO limits you propose would prevent us from offering our full potential to this galactic society. And what potential would that be? Asked the crystal entity, its facets reflecting light in patterns that suggested doubt. John smiled slightly. The same potential you fear, but seen through a different lens. Our adaptability, our innovative thinking, our willingness to try what others consider impossible. He took a step forward. You've judged humanity by our darkest chapters, but you've failed to recognize what makes those chapters meaningful, our ability to write new ones. Yes, we've had wars, but from them we've developed international law and peacekeeping organizations. We've damaged our environment, then pioneered restoration, ecology. We've created weapons, then established arms control treaties. Fixing your own mistakes is hardly impressive, the gas counselor rippled dismissively. Perhaps not, John acknowledged. But consider this. Every species represented in this room evolved on worlds with relatively stable conditions. Your civilizations developed over tens of thousands of years of gradual progress. He gestured to his human colleagues. Humanity evolved on a planet with wildly changing ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, and radical climate shifts. We adapted not just by biological evolution, but through cultural and technological innovation. Crisis didn't destroy us. It drove us to create solutions. The room had grown quiet. The counselors were at least willing to listen, even if their expressions remained doubtful. You see our rapid advancement as threatening, John continued. We see it as necessary survival. You view our expansion as aggressive. We view it as exploration driven by curiosity. You fear our diversity of thought. We consider it our greatest strength. Samuel stepped forward and handed John a small device. With a quick glance at his aide, John activated it. A holographic display appeared above their platform, showing images from Earth's history and achievements. These are not simulations or predictive models, counselors. This is who we are. The images changed quickly. The ancient pyramids, beautiful. Renaissance paintings, the first moon landing. Then more recent achievements. The air cleanup projects, the first Mars colonies. Children from a dozen nations laughing together at the Space Academy. Scientists of various races working on the first faster-than-light prototype. You've accessed our conflicts, but have you truly studied our art? Our music? The thousands of distinct cultures that have contributed to human civilization? The countless times we've chosen cooperation over conflict, creation over destruction? Johnny paused as the display showed Earth from orbit, a blue marble wrapped in the lights of a unified civilization. Humanity doesn't deny our capacity for destruction. We embrace the truth of our history, all of it, both tragic and triumphant, but we refuse to be defined only by our mistakes, rather than by our hopes and achievements. The Vexilor counselor's expression had shifted slightly, showing what might have been thoughtfulness. Your passion is clear, Ambassador. But passion doesn't remove risk. No, it doesn't, John agreed. But risk is the price of progress. Every species in this room took risks to reach the stars. We simply ask for the same opportunity you've all had, to prove ourselves through our actions, not to be judged in advance based on your fears. He turned off the holographic display and walked around the small platform, addressing different sections of the council in turn. If the council insists on restrictions that treat humanity as subjects rather than partners, we will reluctantly decline membership in this community. We will continue our exploration and expansion independently, though we would greatly prefer to do so in cooperation with the civilizations represented here. A wave of whispers swept through the room. The lizard councilor's head fans flattened in obvious anger. This is blackmail. You cannot simply reject the council's judgment. It's not blackmail, Counselor, John said calmly. It's a statement of principle. Humanity will not accept second-class status in the galaxy we share. We believe we have much to offer, much to learn and much to contribute, but only as equals. The room fell silent as the Vexillor Counselor stood and raised all four hands for attention. Ambassador Everett has raised points that deserve consideration, the being said, ignoring the obvious displeasure of several colleagues. Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment. The Crystal Counselor chimed in disagreement. The simulations clearly show the risks of unrestricted human expansion. Simulations, Eleanor said suddenly, speaking for the first time since entering the room, that fail to account for the variables the ambassador has described. All eyes turned to the human scientist. John nodded encouragingly. I've spent my career studying the biological and cultural development of non-human species, Eleanor continued with quiet confidence. And I can tell you that predictive models are only as good as their underlying assumptions. If your models of humanity focus primarily on our conflicts, rather than our growth from them, they will inevitably predict more conflict. The gas counselor swirled in what appeared to be consideration. You propose that our models are fundamentally flawed? I propose, Eleanor replied carefully, that they are incomplete. They may accurately predict what humanity would become if we were treated as dangerous children requiring supervision. But they cannot account for what we might contribute as respected partners. John felt a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Not agreement, certainly, but perhaps the first opening for real dialogue. He stepped forward once more. Counselors, we don't ask you to accept our view of ourselves without question. Judge us by our actions going forward. Set reasonable benchmarks for cooperation. But do not begin our relationship with restrictions based on fear rather than opportunity. He stood tall, meeting the gaze of each counselor in turn. Humanity comes before you not as beggars, but as potential friends and allies who have overcome our own divisions to reach for the stars. All we ask is the chance to show you who we truly are, rather than who you fear we might be. The Vexillor. Counselor studied John for a long moment, then made a gesture that caused the central platform where the humans stood to rise until it was level with the council members. Perhaps, the counselor said thoughtfully, we should continue this discussion as equals. 3 months after the historic first meeting between humans and the Galactic Council, the spaceship Endeavour approached Earth carrying Ambassador John Everett and his team. The blue-green planet grew larger in the window, white clouds swirling across its surface like marble patterns. Home, Eleanor said softly, standing beside John. I never thought I'd be so happy to see it. John nodded, his face thoughtful. 12 weeks of the hardest talks I've ever done, but worth every minute. Do you think they'll keep the agreement? Samuel asked, joining them at the window. The lizard group seemed really against the final terms. The Marilyn, John corrected, using the proper name for the lizard species. And yes, they were against it. But the council works by consensus. Once we had the Vexillor and the Artaxian coalition on our side, the others had to agree. Eleanor smiled. Who would have thought your moment of standing up to them would be the turning point? When you refused their terms, I thought we were going to be kicked out of council space permanently. It was a calculated risk, John admitted, but I saw something in their reactions. Not just dismissal, but curiosity. They'd never met a species that refused to simply accept their judgment. The ship began its descent through Earth's atmosphere, a slight shaking running through the hull. Through breaks in the clouds, they could see the sprawling city of New Washington, its tower clusters shining in the morning light. "President Catherine Powell is waiting to hear our full report," Samuel said, checking his data pad. "The cabinet and representatives from the World Union will be there. The news outlets are calling this the most important diplomatic achievement in human history." John shook his head. "They haven't even seen the technology exchange provisions yet, or the cultural education programs. The treaty itself is just the beginning." The ship landed on the pad atop the World Union headquarters. As they prepared to leave, John held back for a moment. "Before we face the cameras and questions," he said to Eleanor and Samuel, "I want to thank you both. Your support during those first crucial moments made all the difference." Eleanor smiled warmly. "You're the one who stood up to 27 advanced civilizations, John, and somehow convinced them we're not dangerous primitives," Samuel added with a grin. "I just told the truth," John replied. "That humanity isn't perfect, but we're not defined by our mistakes. We're defined by how we learn from them." The ship, Duggar opened with a soft hiss, revealing a welcome committee led by President Powell herself, a tall woman with silver hair and a commanding presence. "Ambassador Everett," she greeted him, extending her hand. "On behalf of humanity, welcome home. We've received the preliminary treaty terms, but I'm eager to hear your personal assessment." John shook her hand firmly. "Madam President, the journey has just begun, but I believe we've established a foundation for genuine partnership rather than subordination." As they walked toward the meeting room, President Powell lowered her voice. "The rumors say you essentially told the entire Galactic Council they were wrong about us. Is that accurate?" John smiled slightly. "I suggested their view was incomplete, and that humanity deserved to be judged on our potential rather than our past." "Bold move, Ambassador." "Necessary, Madam President. There was a moment when I realized they weren't seeing us. They were seeing their simulations and predictions of us. Someone needed to show them the difference." The meeting room was filled with government officials, scientists, and diplomats from around the world. As John took his place at the podium, a hush fell over the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, 3 months ago, humanity stood at a crossroads. We could accept the Council's judgment of our species and take a lower role in galactic affairs, or we could assert our right to be accepted as equals. He paused, looking around the room at the diverse faces watching him intently. "I chose the latter path, not out of pride or defiance, but because I believe deeply in who we are and what we can become. And today I can report that the Galactic Council has agreed to a treaty of mutual cooperation and exchange." A wave of excitement moved through the crowd. John raised a hand for quiet. "The terms include open trade routes through Council space, participation in the Galactic Scientific Exchange, and observer status on the Council itself with a path to full membership within 50 years. The room erupted in applause. John waited for it to subside before continuing. "These achievements didn't come without compromise. We've agreed to coordinate our colonial expansion with neighboring civilizations, to participate in regular diplomatic and cultural exchanges, and to host Council representatives on Earth and our colony worlds." He smiled slightly. "Essentially, we've agreed to be good neighbors, something humanity has been working toward on Earth for centuries." A reporter raised her hand. "Ambassador, sources say your initial response to the Council was unusual and potentially inflammatory. Were you at any point worried that your approach might backfire?" John considered the question carefully. Diplomacy isn't about avoiding difficult truths. It's about finding ways to express them productively. The Council needed to understand that humanity wouldn't accept judgment without dialogue. Once that was established, genuine negotiation became possible. "And what changed their minds?" asked another reporter. "Not any single moment," John replied. "But I believe they began to see us as we truly are. Complex, evolving, and sincerely committed to becoming better than we've been. Most importantly, they recognized that treating us as inherently dangerous would only create the very outcome they feared." President Powell stepped forward. Ambassador Everett demonstrated the very best of humanity in these negotiations: courage, integrity, and wisdom. The treaty he has secured opens unprecedented opportunities for scientific advancement, cultural exchange, and peaceful expansion. As the press conference continued, John found himself thinking about that pivotal moment in the council chamber. When he had refused to accept their dismissive judgment of humanity, it had been a gamble, but one based on a profound truth. No species could truly be known by its history alone, but by its capacity to learn and grow beyond it. Later that evening, after the formal receptions had ended, John stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking up at the stars now known to host hundreds of civilizations. His communication device chimed softly. The message was from the Vexilor counselor, who had been instrumental in shifting the council's position. Ambassador Everett, it read, "Our cultural researchers have been studying human literature since our encounter. We found a quotation that perhaps explains what our simulations missed about your species. We are not defined by the mistakes we make, but by the lessons we learn from them." Your response in the council chamber embodied this principle. The galaxy will be watching to see if humanity as a whole can do the same. I believe you will not disappoint us. John smiled as he wrote his reply. Not perfection, but progress. That has always been humanity's greatest goal. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to prove it. As he sent the message, a shooting star traced a bright path across the night sky, a fitting symbol, John thought, for humanity's new beginning among the stars. The end.